Do we have a quorum? Is this enough for, we good to go?
Now you're rocking.
Okay, I'm good. Well, hopefully I brought some glasses so I won't be able to do it. I mean, I could fake it, but I'd have to hold things out here by that. Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the November 10th, 2022 regular meeting of the Wyandotte Creek Groundwater Sustainability Agency. Please join me in salute the flag of our nation right here behind us. Ready? Salute. Pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Roll call, please.
Board Member Smith,
Here?
Board Member Bynum,
Here.
Board Member Daly, Board Member Riston, and Chairperson Connolly.
Here. Okay, on, first thing up is regular business. We want to approve this is a consent agenda, correct?
No.
Just regular business? Okay, you want to approve the minutes of the September 22nd, 2022 board meeting?
I make a motion we approve the minutes of the September 22nd, 2022 board meeting. Second.
Any discussion on that? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I don't have to do a roll because we're not Zoom, right? Okay. The board will consider approval of the Wyandotte Subbasin project list and recommended project prioritization to be used in developing the Sustainable Groundwater Management SGM program, round 2 grant application. You'll also consider approval of a grant application resolution authorizing the preparation and submittal of a SGMA implementation round 2 application for Wyandotte Creek subdivision. I'm not talking to you anymore because I'm thinking too much about what you were saying. I've got my mind on something else, but yeah, there we go. Give us an update here. Tell us what we're going to approve.
All right, that's a mouthful, yeah. We're just getting the slideshow up. Here we go. Okay, so I'll just frame this up for us and describe the projects. There's a grant opportunity through the Department of Water Resources, and I'll describe the highlights of that. Just to remind you where we came from, we talked about this back in September and talked about possible projects that might be a good fit for this funding opportunity, but that they needed to be further developed. And so that was done in October based on direction here. And we had consultant support on that, really helping us add detail and budget estimates and things like that to the projects. On November 3rd, the Wyandotte Creek Advisory Committee met, and they did bring a recommendation to you, so I'll describe what that was. These two meetings were pretty back-to-back, so I wasn't able to include their recommendation in your staff report, so I'll update you on that. And then here we are today to get direction from you on what projects to include in the grant application and what order of priority they should be in, and we have until December 16th to then get the grant application together and submitted. So today I'll just give an overview of the projects, or what is called, using kind of the application language, each one is a component, and describe the WAC recommended project prioritization. Okay, so a couple high points on the grant program itself. Like I said, this is a DWR grant program. The solicitation officially opened October 4th. With a deadline of December 16th. That just changed 2 days ago. It was November 30th, so we're happy to have a couple extra weeks and take a little bit of pressure off of Thanksgiving, but still moving pretty quickly toward that submission deadline. So it's been kind of a fast-moving process, but we're on track. The final guidelines just describing the program and what was eligible and all of that was released back in December of 2021, but a few things have changed. Then DWR had a webinar describing those. I'll highlight a couple of the ones that are most significant. This is part of 2 rounds, and this is the second round. And notably, all subbasins are eligible for this round. So there's about $231 million available that's coming from a handful of different kind of pots of money. supposedly high and medium priority basins, or any basins that haven't yet received money from round 1, should be kind of prioritized for round 2 funding. But everyone's going after this money, so we do expect it to be really competitive. And when I say everyone, there's over 100 sub-basins, potentially. Yeah.
I need to turn this on.
Yeah. There you go.
There. Maybe it's already been discussed, but how many agencies are there like us in California?
I think there's over 200 GSAs, probably.
Okay.
But sub-basins, which one application per sub-basin,
Right.
I think there's, 130 or something? 134. Yeah,
Okay.
134.
Just, yeah, curiosity question. How many?
Yeah.
How much can we divide that 231 million up? Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. So the PSP says that it'll be a minimum of 1 million per basin and up to 20 million per basin. But given that, right, that there's 130 basins potentially and 231 million, I think we're feeling like if we get a couple $1 million, $1 to $2 million from this, we would be doing really well. So you'll kind of see that's why the ranking is important. The ranking is going to help DWR partially fund our application if we can't be fully funded for everything that we're asking for. And there has to be one application for the subbasin. That's what that last bullet says. Okay, so again, timeline. Submit it by December. They expect to have a draft award list in the spring, and then final awards in July or August next summer. We can have costs be reimbursed that have been expended since October 4th, 2022. So, for example, the annual report work that we're just beginning, we could get reimbursed for by this grant if it gets funded by the grant. But those can go through April 30th of 2026. So just a few years really to spend this money. A couple things to note. The main one that changed in the grant program was that local cost share is no longer required. So that's really awesome. That's just a whole conversation we don't have to have, right, about scrounging up local cost share. And then I mentioned this ranking is important. And as part of the application, there's a table in the application pieces that just has you put your projects in order of priority. So that's why we're talking about prioritization. It doesn't factor into how strong our application is. So they're not going to look at that order until they've decided kind of what they can fund. And then they'll look at the list and say, okay, this is how, we're only going to give you $3 million. This is how far we can go. And which projects do you want funded? But it doesn't kind of factor into how competitive or strong our application is. So the WAC did consider, kind of in light of that, WAC considered what projects could be funded by other grants or funding sources, and really trying to narrow down what do we want to submit as part of this grant, and other things might, pursue other funding sources. So a few highlights on evaluation criteria, because the name of the game here is really to capture as many points as possible to get our application as high up on the list as possible to get funding. So each component or project gets up to 26 points. And that comes from, a good description of the general background and a map of the project, describing the project, and then some dedicated points for whether it benefits underrepresented communities, a tribe, or a severely disadvantaged community. That's what SDAC is. So 4 points if it does, up to 4 points. Will it positively impact issues associated with small water systems or private shallow domestic wells? So possible 4 points there. How does the component address the human right to water? And then a couple extra points for just budget and schedule. So if we submit, say, 5 components, 5 components or 5 projects, each of them are going to be individually scored with that criteria in mind, and then averaged, and then that becomes our application score. So it's just really important that each of our projects that we include are strong and can capture as many of these points as possible. So that's why we've been selective in what projects to include in this grant application. So the WAC recommendation includes 5 components, and I'll walk through and give you the highlights of each of these. The first is we'll walk through each of those. So there's the 5. I'll talk now about the ones that we're not recommending we include in the application. The first is that we've talked about in the past and that are part of the GSP. The first is the Palermo Clean Water Consolidation Project. This is a big project money-wise, and it's pursuing 2 or 3 other funding sources. So we just felt like it wasn't the best fit for this particular grant opportunity. The well upgrades project is Thermalito Water and Sewer District project. They had 2 projects and one of them is in the recommended list. And so they felt that the water treatment plant capacity upgrade really provides more benefit to the basin.
I mean, yeah,
ahead.
but that's an agency that has ratepayers to pay, should pay for what it costs to keep themselves in water. Why would we give them a grant?
Yeah, we can talk.
I just
We can
don't
talk
think
about
it would be applicable. I mean, if you do the Robinson's Riffle project, you'll recharge groundwater like crazy.
So I did talk to Chris Fritz about that one, and just to get an update on where they're at. They do have a DWR grant.
Yeah,
That's a planning grant.
1.2 or 1.4 for planning.
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of in the works. In talking to him, there are definitely a lot of ecosystem function and benefits. I think the challenge with it as a recharge project is that, like the indications in the groundwater sustainability plan is that the Feather River is a gaining river in this area. And so it's possible that, if you inundate and expand the floodplain, you get more recharge from that. But we just don't have, I think it would be a hard sell at this point because we don't have
I still go back
the
to
data.
if I have, well, I have California water now, but I used to always have South Feather.
Yeah.
The ratepayers pay.
And that was talked about with the WAC. I can share kind of why it landed. One of their project that is in the list landed at number 4, but you guys can reorder
And
or
just a
take
question,
out.
are you aware of that weir they built out there and that area for habitat improvement that's already been done
For the Orville
out
Wildlife
in the
Refuge.
wildlife area?
Well, that's out by the outlet. This
Right,
is
it's
a
out there.
different one.
This is in a different location?
Yeah, this is right behind Siding Glance's property. We'd
Okay.
bring the levees down, so instead of back flooding into Orville, it would give it a place to surge
Kinda
out.
go out into-
Helps the salmonoids and all these other things.
Right. So it's
Yeah.
an additional,
Right, yeah.
yeah.
And it's not necessarily
Benefit.
something I want to fund. I'm just saying in my mind, that would be a more general benefit than that. And you're right, maybe that water might flow away from the river, might flow west, we don't know.
Yeah, we don't. Yeah, it's a great project. It's moving forward. I think from a groundwater sustainability perspective, we just felt like it maybe at this point we couldn't clearly communicate what the benefits would be. And so it would be hard to maybe capture as many points as we would want to.
I'm
And
sorry I stopped you.
just to add
No,
to
that's
that,
good.
Christina,
Yeah.
too, I would imagine doing the riffle project would probably not fit within the timeline as well, right?
Yeah,
Oh,
I think
it
that's
would.
right. Yeah. Because they already have the planning.
I just have trouble with
Yep.
Thermalito Water and Sewer, be like Feather, or Cal Water asking for money, and or South Feather, you have ratepayers that.
Yeah, and I'll describe kind of what the status of that project is.
That means you're not doing your job. I'm telling you, the boy.
Well, I understand, but
I-
there's a significant amount of building going on in the Thermalito area.
Every new building should pay their proportion of a new expansion by law.
Why are they coming to us with requests to discount this and discount that?
That's up to you as a board. I'm
I know.
not doing
No,
your
I
job
know.
for you.
I know.
I'm being devil's advocate.
Yeah,
I'm still
no, I
open-minded to
understand.
it.
I can understand what you're saying. I see a tremendous amount of growth in Thermalito, and by having larger capacity and upgraded water tanks, water storage, we can then provide the proper filtered water to all of these places.
And the ratepayers should pay for it.
Well, that the new ratepayers will be paying it forward, not backwards.
I guess the way I look at it, I don't know where the whack is, but just me as an individual, I want to see a general benefit for area. We're supposed to be taking care of recharging and making sure that this water table stays in general healthy. And I can't get and I'm not closed-minded to it. I can't get my mind around if we're helping Thermalito, it's sewer and water district, not water and sewer district, I believe, do this, and why aren't we then helping Cal Water, I don't think, but how does that generally help the area?
So the project that's in the recommended list is the Thermalito Water and Sewer District Water Treatment Plant Capacity Upgrade. That's a $2.3 million project-ish. You're right, it's currently underway and self-funded. So they're prepared and it's underway. They're paying for
So
it.
basically, we would give the ratepayers a break by giving
This would
grant
offset
money to
district
offset
costs.
How,
Yeah.
where were they on looking at more test wells, more science?
Yeah, so I'll get to that. That's,
Okay.
yeah. So let me just go through and then
And
you
tell
can
me if
see how
I'm
it-
totally messed up. I know he's advocating doing his job, and I'm being a smart ass. Then I
You're
understand.
doing your job too.
Well, but I'm just saying.
Yeah, maybe I'll paint the whole picture and then you
Then
can
I'll shut
return
up
to
for a little
this.
bit?
No,
Okay.
you can return to it. It's
I got a
okay.
girlfriend. She can tell me that.
Okay, so component one is what's called, it's a mouthful here, but groundwater sustainability plan implementation, outreach, and interbasin coordination activities. So a lot of things in this. We're gonna get essentially the annual reports for 4 years, a fee study, which is what Cammie will give you an update on in a little bit, for looking at long-term financing of Wyandotte Creek GSA. Currently, that's being funded by Butte County, but this grant could reimburse it. Butte Basin groundwater model update and recalibration, so improving our modeling tools. We expect to have responses. DWR is currently reviewing our GSP, and they will come back with comments. If those comments are significant and they need attention, it would be good to have some resources to be able to respond. That's what that one's about. The next one is develop and implement an approach to set, this is the interconnected surface water sustainable management criteria. So in our plan, we have, we set all the thresholds we needed to, but we recognize that this is a big data gap and needs to be refined. So it's some resources to dive into that particular sustainable management criteria more. There's money there for the 5-year update. So we're going to have an update of the GSP that's due in 2027. So we could try to get resources for that work. Money for outreach and education program. So just developing materials and reaching more folks to help them understand what we're doing, groundwater sustainability management wise. And then data management system, that's required. And we have data, obviously a lot of it, but getting it more organized and in a way that others can access it and to support kind of the reporting requirements. And then we also put, and the WAC recommended, putting the interbasin coordination pieces into this project as well. And so that's what this joint analysis of GSPs in the Feather River corridor is. This would be a technical effort, get a consultant on board to look at our GSP, our neighboring GSPs in the Sutter Subbasin, Butte Subbasin, and North Yuba Subbasin to understand what assumptions we made about water budgets, flows, where we set thresholds, where our monitoring networks are. So this is an interbasin coordination piece. And then $20,000 to support other interbasin coordination efforts. So that's a big project. It's covered up there, about $1.2 million, I think. But this piece really, this whole component essentially takes care of kind of the must-dos of the GSA over the next 4 years. So if we could
So if we
capture-
get this grant, we don't have to go out to people and ask them for the money, which is going to be studied here. How we're going to ask them for money eventually. I really
Right.
get this one. I
Yeah,
really
so
support
this
all
takes
this.
care of a lot of this is what we're responsible for as a GSA. So
Right.
that's why the WAC recommended it at the top of the list.
I absolutely
So this is
agree with
priority
that
one.
one.
Sorry. No, that's good.
Everybody good with that one?
Yeah.
So that one-
Otherwise, we're gonna have to tax somebody somehow. to do it.
Otherwise, that's locally funded.
Right.
Yep. Yeah.
That's when this is not gonna be fun. We go, oh, we're gonna put a meter on your water. No, you're not.
Okay, so the second one was a combination of two smaller projects. So the first is agricultural surface water supplies. So this idea is really, right, that there are many agricultural users solely dependent on groundwater in the subbasin. There are surface water supplies that South Feather Water and Power District agency have, and in some cases Thermalito Water Sewer District. And so looking for those opportunities to use surface water instead of groundwater, and looking at what would be needed to do that in terms of policy, legal, engineering, and evaluating the opportunities there. So this is a it was originally about $240,000, I think.
So we're talking like and the other side. And so then we get.
I think this is actually more a water supply project for irrigation. So it's more identifying surface water sources that could directly provide irrigation water. Yep. Yeah, exactly. So either their water or South Feather to be used in the basin and offset groundwater pumping.
Just so you mind how my mind.
Yep. Yeah, so that's kind of the first piece of this one. And then the second piece is irrigation efficiency evaluation, and really kind of diving into the details in terms of opportunities for precision irrigation piloting program. So what, field scale inventory of irrigation methods, understanding ET, and really trying to quantify what's the opportunity for water savings through irrigation efficiency changes in the subbasin. So that's what this piece is about. So together, it's really an agricultural, sustainability type of program to look at reducing groundwater use through either irrigation efficiency or new surface water supplies. So this is a $400,000 project, and the WAC put it at number 2. Any questions before I go on to number 3? Okay. So number 3, here comes the monitoring network enhancements to address data gaps. So this is where we want to put in more monitoring wells, right? Multi-completion wells, shallow groundwater monitoring wells, potentially outfit domestic wells with data loggers to add to our network, install surface water stream gauges to help us better understand stream and groundwater interaction, refining our mapping of the groundwater dependent ecosystems that we identified in the GSP and identified as a data gap, integrating all this data into the data management system. And then there's some money for interbasin coordination. So whenever we think about monitoring, it would be good to kind of look past our borders and see what our neighbors are doing and coordinate on how to monitor what's happening at the borders. And then some money for outreach and engagement on this task. So this is a $1.4 million project to install infrastructure to improve, fill those data gaps and improve the monitoring network. Yeah, well, yeah, so there was discussion about that at the WAC. I'll just go back to the overall list here again. The thinking was, I think, that the $400,000 is a relatively small amount of money compared to 1.4. So if you put it above, maybe it's more likely to get funded. Maybe they're both more likely to get funded than if it's below the 1.4. The other thought on the monitoring network, and there was quite a bit of discussion about this, is DWR also has their technical support services program, which is for installing monitoring wells. That's how we got the monitoring well, the multi-completion well that was installed last year. So even if we were partially funded, if they partially funded this monitoring network, we could try to pursue those TSS funds to get more monitoring in place. Right. So I think those two reasons is why it was at number 3 instead of number 2. But still pretty high on the list, and hopefully it would get funded. Oh, yeah. Okay, I'm going to go back. So that was number 3. So number 4, okay, this is where we come to the Thermalito Water and Sewer District Water Treatment Plant Capacity Upgrade. They've already done the planning for this. The project is underway. So this would really just have a construction task. And like we've talked about, it's essentially trying to capture grant money to offset district costs to do this project. The basin benefits of this project are essentially it will provide additional surface water capacity to offset the district's groundwater pumping, which is approximately 600 acre feet per year. So that's kind of the quantified benefit is by doing this project, it allows them to use their groundwater wells less by up to 600 acre feet per year.
I just wanted to say that Chris is online, so he's unmuted if you have
good.
questions for him.
Chris Heindel.
Yeah.
Are we legal to do that since we're,
Because he's a staff member, you can have him
a
speak.
staff member can? Okay.
So that's this project, and the WAC put it at number 4. And then the 5th one is, it's called right now, and we may need to refine this title, but Groundwater Recharge Feasibility Analysis and Site Evaluation. And this project is based on kind of the FloodMar stream flow augmentation projects that were described in the GSP. FloodMar initiative was originally developed by the Department of Water Resources. It's flood managed aquifer recharge. So the idea is you take flood water and find places to put it and let it soak into the ground. So recharge, to promote recharge programs. What we talked about with the WAC is that this could really be, looking at where we have drainage problems, like in Palermo, and it's a stormwater management project, and look for ways to make it a recharge project also. So it would focus on initial scoping and identification of specific stormwater management to enhance recharge opportunities, for instance, in the Palermo area. So it has, it's a $1.8 million project because it goes from feasibility phase through construction and implementation activities. And these are estimates, but it would include, evaluating what recharge investigation, preliminary design, so doing more geotechnical work to understand, where you could park the water, how it would soak in, where it would go if it did. And then it includes the permitting and CEQA, final design, bid documents for construction, and construction. So this is at the bottom of the list because it's a big project, relatively big project. If it were to get funded, that would be awesome, right? But if it is much higher on the list or ahead of some of those other things we talked about, it could be the only thing that gets funded. So that's kind of why the WAC put it down at number 5. So again, this is the summary of those, and I'll come back to this slide. So the total ask would be about 7.6, almost $7.7 million. I will say that as we refine the scopes and budgets of these projects, I think these numbers could change slightly, but generally that's what we would be asking for on each of these. So just a couple things that could change as we put the application together. We'll probably want to think about whether specific projects need their own project administration, outreach, monitoring tasks. So we'll just do that if we feel like it would add points, to the project or make it a more successful project. We'll probably tighten up the titles and tasks a bit, but the content wouldn't change significantly. We'll just make them stronger for the application. The work plans in the application itself are pretty streamlined and simple, and so just a heads up there, we'll be, doing that per grant program instructions. The project schedules, which we haven't really talked about today, but we'll probably be refining those a bit. And then for the budgets, we've been talking about these things in terms, for each task, we've had assigned a budget estimate to it. But for the grant, there's only 5 broad categories. So grant agreement administration, environmental engineering design, implementation, construction. So that's a huge category. Monitoring and assessment, and then engagement and outreach. So we can roll these things up into those 5 budget categories, which gives us flexibility on the back end once the awards are given to spend money, between tasks. Okay, so our requested action is to approve the project list, and the priority that we'll then use to develop the grant application. And then secondly, to approve the grant application resolution that authorizes preparation and submittal of the grant application. So with that, I will go back to that summary table and look for your direction.
Yeah, now their logic makes more sense, but what is the rest of you think? Bill?
Could you go all the way back to the beginning and give me the rationale again why the Palermo water is not considered a water
Yes.
project?
So a couple things. I think we expect this grant to be very competitive. So it's a $12 million project. You want to give an update on Palermo project and what?
So the Palermo Clean, here, let me go back to this, that way I don't have to lean over.
We'll just give you an update on what the status of the other funding applications are.
So the Palermo Clean Water Consolidation Project has a number of grant applications that have been submitted to fund it. Some of the funding that's already been received was through IRWM that provided the design plans, and then the Board of Supervisors also allocated $3 million towards the project. And that's currently being used for some of the initial the initial phase 1 items. However, we also have a $12 million SRF state revolving loan fund application in, and it's highly likely that will go through, that we were just waiting for the annexation completion and then the legal description of the boundaries so that they could complete the certificate of completion, and that is in process and probably even almost done now. And once that is completed, we'll submit that to the SRF folks, and hopefully they'll say, yay, your application's complete, and we'll award you funding. We've also submitted funding through one of the drought programs with the Department of Water Resources, and I think that was 4.6 million. So even if we didn't get the full SRF amount, we could utilize some of those funds. And then we're also the federal government through the senators have put us on a list for potentially receiving $2.2 million. So hopefully the Palermo will just be funded with the SRF, but we have multiple funding sources to put towards that project. And it also received $525,000 from IRWM for recently too. So there are numerous funding sources for Palermo.
Okay.
But on the criteria where you show the points awarded,
Yeah.
Palermo definitely hits every spot. I'm thinking now about the drainage problem out there. There has never been an engineered and complete drainage in the area, and it's very, very difficult because we do not own easements on the drainage. So that project you have listed last seems like it would score all of these points, and it's really needed. And if we could throw a curve in there and say it's a recharge project, it might get funded. I'm just.
That would be the intent there, is to frame it as a recharge project, but
But
it's
see,
largely
got the other hat
largely
on.
a drainage
I have
project.
a big
Right.
problem out there because we
Right.
can't enter the streams except in extreme emergencies, like a declared disaster. We can enter the streams and clean them out. Otherwise, every year with just not a whole lot of rain, it floods.
Right.
Right down the four corners there, floods.
So the county does have, and the department is working on a request for proposal. So the county does have a Cal OES grant for $300 and something thousand
Which would probably
dollars
be the engineering.
for the design, for the drainage design for that area. So I'm currently working with Public Works to get an RFP out for design and utilize those funds. So a recharge project could tier off of that project, and that could be incorporated. Some kind of recharge component could be incorporated into that project, or an extension like a phase 2 of a drainage study. That could be possible. And I do know that Public Works also has a Safe Routes to School project in the Palermo area as well. And so now we're working together to kind of coordinate what's happening with the drainage study, what's happening with that Safe Routes to School project as well.
Yeah,
So
there's no sidewalks
Mm-hmm.
for the kids there. So I guess what I'm trying to frame in my mind and understand, if we leave them in the order they did, which I understand the logic now, especially since you pointed out thermally is going to save all that groundwater. That's general benefit. I can get my mind around that. Why would they keep it in this order to fund it? Why wouldn't they jump down to the one that has the most points under their point system?
Yeah, so
Do
what
they keep our prioritization? That's my question.
that's what they've indicated to us. I mean, we don't know exactly the mind of DWR, but what they've indicated is that they're not even going to look at our ranking list until they've scored our application. They're going to score our application, decide what they can award, and then they're going to turn to our list if they can't award the $7.7 million, and they'll fund whatever projects they can fund.
Well, bluntly,
That's what we've been told.
bluntly, we're being punished for being in good condition, really.
I know, yeah.
If we could say we had a huge decline in our groundwater, or is an imminent decline, we would be scored up higher in the prioritization. So do you think we'll get the whole 7 million, or?
Probably not.
That's what I'm thinking.
Probably not. I think if we get 1, 2, and 3 funded, we're doing great.
Okay.
I think-
I'm good with it. I just
But-
had to do my job and ask the questions. That's the board. What do you guys want to do?
Well,
I think they did a good job.
I have a question. One of your just recent statements, the application goes in and they look at it and approve it, and then it goes over to the funding section, it sounds like, and they decide what they can fund. So they could take projects out of order, even though we put, these are our priorities, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but they could say, well, we can't fund, we think that we ought to fund 5 instead of funding 1 and 2.
No, that's not what they've indicated. So what they're going to score the application, which means they look at each individual project
Right.
and score each project, average that, and then add our other 2 points, and the whole application maybe gets 25 points. And then that ranks us with the other people that got 25 points and, ranks us
Okay.
across with the applications. And then, and this is, who knows how they're going to decide how much money they can fund our application. But if they can't say, we can't do your 7.6, then they're going to look at our funding list and supposedly just go down the list. So they
Oh, okay.
shouldn't pick and choose. That's why we're giving them,
Okay, I was just,
A ranking
maybe I
list.
misunderstood what you were
Yeah,
saying, but.
sorry about
So
that.
they're still just gonna go, we can fund 1, 2, 3, and 4, or 1, 2, and 3, but we can't fund 4 and 5.
that's our understanding, yeah.
Yeah, okay,
Right.
thank you.
Yeah.
The beautiful thing about putting the groundwater recharge, it's going to give us a lot of points on the front end.
Yeah, it's a great project, right? So it should
Points.
be good. Yeah. Yep. And maybe it'll entice them to drop down to the bottom of our list and give us our whole, who knows, the mind of DWR, right? When they go to
Well, I've been
actually fund these things. But
tussling with the mind of DWR for about
Right.
18 years.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
don't understand it.
Does this have anything to do with the consultant that we're going to choose? Are they going to help with this, or are they just totally
do you mean for the funding?
detached from this?
Do you mean the funding options that we're talking about? Or what do you mean for consultant?
I mean, when we hire a consultant,
to do this work, or
are they going to help with this,
so
Is
we have a consultant contracted right now, Ludor Scalmanini Consulting Engineers is helping us. They helped scope some of these projects, and they're helping us pull this grant application together. That was a small contract
Okay.
that we have with them.
The other consultant that's mentioned in there is the one that is going to tell us the different avenues of sustainable funding.
Right, and that's a different
And that's when
project.
you're going to be chair of this. That's when everybody's going to show up. You want a what?
So that's another point I'll just throw in there. So we are, and I'll be giving an update about the funding mechanism project, how we're going to fund the GSA. So many of the activities, like in item 1, could be funded by the GSA. So depending on how you all decide you want to fund the GSA, you could say, oh, maybe we'll really try to commit to $1.2 million of a budget over 5 years and fund that through the GSA and take that out of the list. Or you could say, well, let's try and get that so we don't have to do as big of a fee to the people of Wyandotte Creek Subbasin. So you could one or the other. So just to keep that in mind. So it would be essentially the state kind of contributing and paying for the GSA versus everyone in the boundaries of the GSA through some kind of fee.
Well, I think that's the biggest lift we have, and we've known it from the very beginning that eventually we have to fund it. And I'd just as soon get the grant and fund 1.2 million. Maybe I'll die in office or something, and then it'll be somebody else's problem. Making a joke, but taxing people is difficult any way you word it. Okay, any more questions or comments? Not, I'll entertain a motion. The recommendation?
Yeah, all the recommendations, 1 through 5.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Aye. Very logical, actually.
It was a good discussion with the WAC. Yeah, we appreciate their input. And then the second piece of this item is passing the resolution. So look for
Okay, I'll
action on that also.
entertain a motion on the
All part of
resolution.
the same item. I
Oh.
assumed that, I guess.
Oh, that's okay.
Make a motion on the resolution, please.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? You got me whipped into shape now. All right. So next, we're going to move on to
Just-
management team updates.
Yes, so just a verbal update, which I kind of started a little bit, regarding the funding, the long-term funding mechanism. We did issue a request for proposal. We received numerous proposals. We selected 3 firms to conduct interviews with, and we did that on October 28th. Last week, we kind of finalized the ranking of those. We have started some contract negotiations with the top-ranked firm. And so we're refining their scope, talking about any contract issues. There are none at this point. And then we expect that that contract will go to the Board of Supervisors at their December meeting. So barring any unusual circumstances, it'll likely be the first-ranked firm. So we'll kind of wait to announce that at a later date. Yeah, so if there's any questions regarding that, I am open to that. We will be doing one contract for both the Vina GSA and the Wyandotte Creek GSA, but they will have 2 separate kind of courses of action, being that Vina is very different than
I
Wyandotte Creek.
vote Vina pays our bills. Well, I mean, come on.
And then just in addition to that, for other verbal manager comments, we did, with the annual report contract, that was approved by the Board of Supervisors on Tuesday, and that's a contract with Ludorf and Scalmanini, and they're teamed with David's Engineering. So Kelly Peterson in our department is leading that effort, and we'll be getting started on the annual reports as they are due April 1st and integrating that into the process with what this department has to do for the Board of Supervisors and presenting them an annual water update every year, usually in February, but most likely in April. And that's all I have to report. Christina, anything to add to that?
Questions or comments by board members? I'm good. Thank you. Verbal manager committee updates?
That was kind of it.
That's it? Okay, so we'll adjourn then, and we'll see you back here January 26th at 2 PM.
2023.
That should be January 26th, 2023.
2023.
I caught an error. I usually never catch those.
Whoops.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because you divide that in a local political race. Through.
Yeah, I'd been concerned about that for a while.
He seems like a good enough guy.
Oh, yeah.
It's gonna be.
I think it kept doubling down on that.
You don't think?
It